Good day to you. This is Anagalactic on a Thursday, the 17th of July, and we are in a series that began yesterday with some readings from the Qur'an and about the Qur'an for the purpose of enlightening Western scientists and anybody else who cares to listen to what is required of a man now to know. If you're a scientist, but you don't know anything about Islam, or worse, you promote propaganda against them, it's time for you to wake up. And as a scientist, the only source that could possibly convince you to change your mind about anything is rational science, rational logic, the facts. So that's what I'm going to give you today, using this book that we read from yesterday, a translation of the Qur'an by a Western man who's highly sympathetic to the message of the only religion that has ever existed. It is called the Way of Heaven, and in the Islam mode of speech, that is called Islam. It means the way. Adam was the first of the prophets. Hanokh was the next. Then came Noach. And then after the Chicxulub impactor, which destroyed all life on Earth, the humans who were kept alive aboard the Ark, which was an actual craft which rode out the mega tsunamis on the other side of the Earth from the impact, which was in today's Yucatan Peninsula. All of that is in Wikipedia. So if you're a scientist, you now know that the Bible flood is true. So the flood is true. Also, the Genesis record in what is, in my argument, called Toledoth 0, which was the direct transmission of the first chapter of Genesis to Adam, who wrote it down. Well, he didn't write it down because writing was invented by Hanokh, which was the seventh from Adam, I think. And then came the flood basically because of evil angelic activity, including the invention of the dinosaurs, which was a satanic manipulation of the DNA. There's no such thing as natural selection. There's no such thing as biological evolution. What is being referred to there is the action of the engineers, who came here a second time. I did not find that in Genesis, and it really disturbed me. This was about 50 years ago. Really bothered me that there was no record of the recreation of the earth. The recreation of the ecology, it's not in Genesis. Well, it actually is. The Book of Enoch was rediscovered at the end of the 18th century. It was translated into Latin. It has since been translated into English more than once. It is the missing part, I'll say one of the missing parts, of the Genesis record. The Jews, that is, not really the Jews, but the Israelis, expunged it. They would not allow the Book of Hanokh to enter the Bible. Actually, by the time of the expunging, only Judah was left, but a tribe of Jews in Ethiopia kept it. It was rediscovered by Europeans. Now I own a copy, and I will teach it to you, because in the Book of Hanokh is the missing piece of my research. Yes, the engineers did come back, the Elohim, and they recreated the ecology. So Darwin was right. There was speciation under the guiding hand of the Lord God Almighty. And if you're a scientist and you don't accept that, you're no longer a scientist. You will not ever be a scientist again. You're too stupid. You're also dangerous. This is the truth. So, we're now going to read from this fantastic book by a Westerner, but it has the full endorsement of the Islam community for very good reason. This man is Islam. So am I. The name Qur'an means the recital or reading. According to its own word, the Qur'an is a revealed book in the spiritual tradition of the Torah and the Gospel, as those were transmitted by Moshe, or Moses, and Yeshua, connecting itself and these distinguished predecessors to even earlier dispensations of original religion. The Quran represents its teachings as confirming and clarifying the truth of what was in those messages. That is absolutely correct. The Quran is undeniably unique in this tradition. Unique. That, in this case, that's good. And indeed unique in the entire context of classical sacred tradition throughout the world. This is true religion. Only Islam is true. Because only Islam attempts to tell the whole truth. I'm here to make sure that Islam actually has access to the whole truth. You don't yet. You have enough. But you should not be satisfied because there's more. That's why I'm here. Is to help you. The way heaven helped me. All right. The Quran is undeniably unique in this tradition, and indeed unique in the entire context of classical sacred tradition throughout the world, in having been revealed in the full light of history through the offices of a prophet who was well known. That's Muhammad, peace be upon him. Oh yes, he was a prophet. There are different kinds of prophets. The Israeli prophets were very specific type. Muhammad is an Ishmaeli prophet. Allah guided Muhammad to form a new nation so that God would have children. And God's children, in this sense, have to be descended from Ibrahim, peace be upon him. The Israelis were descended also from Ibrahim through Yitzhak and Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. That nation has been destroyed. It's under the permanent condemnation of God, and that nation that's called that is not even a nation. It's part of the beast, which is talked about in Apokalypsis. That's what I'll be teaching you, is what that thing is in Jerusalem. They're all white, by the way. None of them are Semitic. They're Europeans. All right. As the last link in a chain of revelation going back to time immemorial, even to the very origin of humankind, the Quran has the special function of recollecting the essential message of all revealed books and distinguishing this from the opinions and reactions later interpolated into ancient texts whose original dispensation had taken place in remote and even in unknown times. Therefore, the Quran Therefore, the Qur'an is not only called the reading or the recital, but also the criterion. It is called a reminder and also clarification. A modern descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, you're not going to hell if you forget to say peace be upon him, okay? But you should say it the first time because it shows respect.
For Christ's sake.
Alright. Therefore, the Qur'an is called the criterion, it is called a
reminder and also a clarification. A modern descendant of the Prophet Muhammad wrote of this comprehensive scope and function of the book in these terms, quote, "The Qur'an is nothing but the old books refined of human alloy, and contains transcendental truths embodied in all sacred scriptures with complete additions necessary for the development of all human faculties. It repeats truths given in the Holy Vedas, in the Bible, in the words of the Gita, in the sayings of Buddha, and all other prophets, and adds what was not in them, and gives new laws to meet the contingencies of the present time when the different members of God's family, who lived apart from each other in the days of the old revelations, had come close to one another." Might be speaking of today, wouldn't you say? Now Cleary uses a word which is very dear to my heart in geometry and science, and you'll recognize it. Because the Qur'an synthesizes and perfects earlier revelations, its function as a criterion to distinguish between truth and falsehood is not carried out in the form of dogmatic assertion or condemnation of one religion or another, but in the form of distinction between human artifice and the essential meaning of religion, between hypocrisy and true faith. Thus the same writer explains, quote, "The Qur'an calls itself Hakam, judge, to decide between Christian and Christian, between Hindu and Hindu, between Buddhist and Buddhist, and so it did." Unquote. The observation that the Qur'an distinguishes the differences within adherents of each religious dispensation rather than among the dispensations themselves per se seems to be a key to approaching the Qur'an without religious bias. The Qur'an could not function in this manner in the context of world religions if it were no more than a collection of dogma or the handbook of a particular new sect or cult. The Qur'an speaks to humanity as a whole, to nations, communities, families, and individuals, complete with both an outer teaching and an inner teaching. That's why I'm here. It speaks both to persons and to souls, individually and collectively. A contemporary descendant of the Prophet writes of the often unsuspected depth, richness, and intrinsic breadth of the Qur'an in these terms, quote, "For the sources of these quotes, you may consult this book over here, and I've provided a link to that book. It's the one from which I'm reading, but you'll be able to find out more information as we continue this series in Islam, science, the Qur'an, and the Holy Scriptures that go from Adam, a book that you fear because it's the last of the Israeli prophets. His name was Johann. And tradition has it, although nobody can prove this, but I doubt it not, he was boiled in oil by the... All right. Quote, "For the Sufis of the classical period, the Qur'an is the encoded document which contains Sufi teachings." If you don't know who the Sufi are, don't worry about it. You're not held responsible for stuff that wasn't revealed to you through ordinary channels. But this is something you'll want to know. I certainly am grateful that I know about the Sufi teachings. Theologians tend to assume that it is capable of interpretation only in a conventionally religious way, speaking of the Qur'an. Historians are inclined to look for earlier literary or religious sources, that's in vain. Others for evidence of contemporary events reflected in its pages. There are some of those, because every prophet has had to deal with his own time. For the Sufi, the Qur'an is a document with numerous levels of transmission, each one of which has a meaning in accordance with the capacity for understanding of the reader. Now, I literally know nothing of this, but I know this kind of language. This is an Islam scholar speaking, one of the descendants of Muhammad. And that's considered to be, let's show a little respect here, okay? Just because you live in the West, that doesn't mean you know anything. All right? For the Sufi, the Qur'an is a document with numerous levels of transmission. That's also true of the I Ching. Each one of which has a meaning in accordance with the capacity for understanding of the reader. Of course, because God is attempting to reach you with the truth of heaven. Isn't that what science wants? Depends on what you mean by science. It's certainly what a real scientist wants, because it's what I want. That's the definition of a real scientist in America. You're looking at him.
I'm the last.
It is this attitude toward the book, that is reverence, which made possible the understanding between people who are of nominally Christian, pagan, or Jewish backgrounds, a feeling which the Orthodox in any one of those groups could not understand, because it's composed of humans. But that does not invalidate Islam for the same reason that lying does not invalidate the message of God, and lying Christ does not take away from Yeshua's mission. All right? Same thing. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Nothing wrong with any of those religions as long as your heart is right. I don't know how it could be simpler. Oh, nobody takes it simply. That's what's meant by the dogmatists. Okay, these are the best at this. They'll argue about anything. They're very well known for it. It's because their hearts are not right. All right. The Quran, in one sense, is therefore a document of psychological importance. Now, this man knows what he means by that, but when you say psychological, it's good though. There's nothing wrong with what this man is saying. You do have to have ears to hear, though. All right. So that's the end of that quote. And now we're going to close this out. Here again, it can be seen that the very least advantage we can derive from reading the Quran is the opportunity to examine our own subjectivity in understanding a text of this nature. In other words, he's relating this to the I Ching, and really to anything that's coded. There's more than one level. The I Ching is famous for that. A highly holy book. Even though I'm a Christian, I'm not like any Christian you've ever met. I'm Islam Christian. Islam is the governing body now. So I submit. This can have important educational consequences. Yes, it certainly would have. If anybody had ever taught me, it would have changed my life. So yeah, I may be expressing a vendetta here. It's from God. I will not execute vengeance. You know why? Vengeance is mine, saith Yahweh. That's, by the way, synonymous with Allah, except they come from two different roots. Allah means beloved. It really is a term you would use of your father. Of course, he's your father. So Allah, of course, is the right way to address him. But Yahweh is his actual name, and that means the one causing being. It's infinitive causative. I discovered that. And then I was excommunicated from every church I was in, and I was in more than one, because I'm an official missionary from heaven to earth. I went to Ukraine to express that I'm willing to travel. I traveled a long way to get here. There's a level to what I just said that I hope you got. So the next part that we're going to read tomorrow, actually later today because it's in the middle of the night, the advent of the Qur'an. I'm sure that you'll tune in for that. Whether you're Islam or not, you'd better, or you're just going to miss out on the truth, because I've got it and nobody else does. That's what Muhammad said, by the way. I follow right in his footsteps. It's just that I am not Semitic. God is great. He's above all. He can make a prophet out of a dog if he wants to. So stay tuned. We keep looking up. Although the moon hasn't even risen yet. Actually, it might have by now. So I'm keeping strange hours because I'm a scientist and I live alone. My wife died 16 years ago. So if it seems like I'm a little, all prophets are. Good day to you. This is Hanokh bringing you another science presentation. Although currently we are in a series to talk about Islam and particularly the Qur'an. In the prior video, I was reading from a book about the Qur'an, which is geared towards people who know little about it. And this is that book, which it's available at Internet Archive, which is a very well-known site, but it's not available for download or for reading. That is what they call borrowing, where you can read it online. So I do apologize that this is not legible. I was able to find it at a place called document.pub, which I've used before. I would consider it safe, but that's a question I used to get a lot. Not so much these days, because nothing is safe. You either just crawl into a hole and forget the internet completely, or you take a chance. This is from the introduction to Thomas Cleary's masterful book. I believe they are called Surah, but they vary wildly, I would say, in length. The very first one is very short, and the second one is quite long. About 250 verses, if I recall correctly. I believe there are close to 100 surah. It is a quite long book, but it's not difficult at all. In fact, it's so well worth reading that I am somewhat resentful toward my society for not having shown me this book at an early age. Certainly by high school, all Americans should have at least some knowledge of the Qur'an. The reasons for that kind of suppression are so well known that I don't want to start this off on a negative note, because we have something truly to celebrate here. Certainly I do, and I would like to share that. Really, there's no difference between people, ultimately, except their environment in which they were raised. I've read a lot of commentary by Islam scholars from 1,000 years ago, as an average, I would say, to see what they talk about. Generally, Westerners are aware of the role of Islam in the progress of science. I'm a scientist, and so I should be dealing strictly in truth. Science is quite rigorous, and it has a quite limited scope, but you would never know it these days. So there is a very interesting trend going on in science, which everyone is aware of. I don't believe anyone is unaware of the tragic situation in Western science. It's just almost unfaceable. Now, that is an overstatement because I present myself as a true scientist. But now, you have to use the word true to distinguish yourself from a run-of-the-mill scientist. There are several ways you can be sure that you're dealing with a true scientist. If a man states that he is an atheist, you simply must disregard him. But of course it's up to you. If you want to take a chance with an atheist, you're going to get an atheist's point of view, which is worthless. So you may need the knowledge that that man has. I'm sure that I have studied in the past under men who claim to be atheists. It's quite different from agnostic, although the way Americans use words is quite haphazard. There is another form of truth which is not strictly subject to the rigors of science. The lines are somewhat fuzzy these days, and perhaps always have been, but without going into extraordinary detail on a negative topic, which I never like to stay on. It is important to keep one's guard up, though, because, of course, pseudoscience is dominant now, and atheism has emerged. Is the person paid either to be a professor or a mathematician? If the person is paid, they're going to say what is expected of them by those who pay them, which, by and large, is the government. And you don't want to listen to a man who, for instance, is talking about a model. The Big Bang, you must not listen to that person. They're simply lying. There's no way around it. Most of the people who talk about quantum mechanics, it would be a bit going too far to say that they're liars. The Big Bang people are definitely liars. They never should have credited that ridiculous theory to begin with. It's just drummed into our heads, certainly in America. The children are brainwashed and have been for several generations now that the universe is expanding. That's absurd. That's a completely anti-scientific statement. Now, when it comes to quantum mechanics, I prefer not to use the word liar, because nobody knows what the hell they're talking about in any way. Nobody knows what quantum anything means in any way. And you'll be led astray if you listen to them. If they're expounding a model, if they're just giving you the facts that the original discoverers encountered, that's valuable. That's what you want. But it's extraordinarily difficult to get a straight answer from a modern scientist. Now, I take a very hard line about science. I am maximally hard line when it comes to the truth. And Islam is quite generous. It recognizes all religions. But the dividing line between truth and falsehood crosses the line of every religion, because there is a good side to life. And it's not necessary to concentrate on the evils of this world. But in order to do that properly, that is, to separate yourself mentally, you actually have to separate yourself. And it's work. It's extremely difficult to disentangle oneself from any society, so you need to go your own way. That's quite difficult. Abraham found it difficult. Ibrahim, peace be upon him, the father of the Semitic people. The Semitic people are called Semitic because Abraham was a descendant of Shem, and that's where we get Shemite or Semite. There used to be more Semitic people than there are now, because 12 tribes of Semitic people have disappeared. Is I know the history of the entire region. I know exactly how Israel got back on the map. It's one of the most destabilizing stories that I've ever run across. Heaven will show you a way out. I can only say that's what happened with me. Those who don't believe in a supreme intelligence are quite difficult to deal with. Because if you happen to know any information that has to do with a supreme designer, a creator, a supreme being, which must exist or there wouldn't even be any science. If you find that the ecology is well designed, then you're naming the creator. Carl Gustav Jung said, any group of like-minded men has a morality in inverse proportion to its size. If you apply that maxim to organized science, you have found something comparable to the Vatican, comparable to the papacy, which caused the Dark Ages. The greatest scientist who ever lived, I have very good reason for saying that, was a Jesuit priest who discovered everything that we need to know now about quantum mechanics was discovered in the 18th century by a Jesuit priest named Boshkovich. So all of this is to say that I am pursuing science because science begins with a designer, because everything in science is predicated on conscious, intelligent design. You see, that's exactly what the white Western world has been rebelling against for centuries because of the Vatican, because of the papacy, which extorted money from people and murdered them. Only now science is the criminal, which is quite a broad statement. The point that I'm trying to make is, if you are against, dead set against the idea of design because you think it's anti-scientific, then you must keep your mouth shut. Because you're a liar. You're deceived. There is, of course, a designer. That's the most basic, rational, scientific statement of all. That the ecology just came from dirt is insane, to say nothing of being absolutely illogical. That man who says that is immoral. These men have no shame. And Dr. Sabina Hassenfelder, whom I just heard today in her latest video, say fuck. She's so angry about Eric Weinstein and the whole bullshit enterprise that's going on all around her that she was so furious. I've never seen her like this. I really like Sabina Hassenfelder, although she doesn't have any solutions. She wrote a book called Lost in Math. Edward Frankel is part of the problem. A scientist has to be well balanced. A scientist has to have the broadest perspective of any kind of man. Yes, we're beholden to the rules of rational logic, but we are not beholden to mathematics at all. Because you can make mathematics lie. It has been done, of course. So what we're going to do today is talk about the Qur'an, which is an ancient book of religion. But it's not like anything you've ever heard of. It's not doctrinal. It's not part of a church, although there is a very advanced system among Islam scholars for discussing the Qur'an, and the Jews did the same thing with the law of Moses, and of course completely screwed it up. And the Islam people are not totally, immune from that. They had a lot of problems, as all religions do, in deciding on things which in context seem important, but actually are not that important. You need to face the facts of life. You did not invent yourself. You did not arrive here because you chose to. Here's what I would like to tell you. What happens to you after you're dead? I'll tell you, and it's the only right answer. No matter what you've heard in mythology, religion, philosophy, or just the chatter, you're either going to be unconscious, because death is the negation of consciousness, and that's it. Or you will be conscious after death. You will be conscious after death. A moment's thought should convince you that is the only rational answer for two indisputable reasons. One of the reasons is, if you had no consciousness after death, then your life is meaningless in all of its parts. But that leads to something I think every rational, secular man or religious man must accredit. And this is my decision. So you can take it or leave it, because I don't believe this is written anywhere, but I'll tell you what, I'm just trying to be humble here. If there is no consciousness after death, then Adolf Hitler is a saint. Isn't he? Yeah, because he got away with murder. You could make your own list from Al Capone to Joseph Stalin, to the person who killed one of your children, or the person who killed your husband or your wife. What happens to that monster? You just eat it because that's part of evolution and the survival of the fittest? Well, then you're not human. That is Islam.
The way I interpret it.
The way a child is born is innocent. Does that child deserve to live? Absolutely. Because it hasn't had a chance to make any decisions at all. But bar mitzvah was invented for a reason, and every culture has a bar mitzvah. That is, coming of age, where you're accountable. It's arbitrary. It's like 14 or 13. That's ridiculous. But the principle is ineluctable. At some point, which only you will know, you become accountable to the universe in which you were born. Either you recognize that it comes from a supreme mind to which you owe your life, or else you go to hell. And those are your only two choices. You will not be unconscious after death. Or so would Hitler. So would Trump. So would Netanyahu. So would every murderer. That would simply prove, you would be stating by your own life, because you don't believe in God, because you're so smart, you're consigning anybody who listens to you will be poisoned by your attitude. So science is not for children. Science is the sign of an adult. I don't see it. I don't see Neil deGrasse Tyson. I don't see Sean Carroll. Michio Kaku. None of them. Going back for generations now, they will not bow the knee to reality. Well, you're not a scientist. That's what the Qur'an says. That's what Muhammad said. That's what Jesus said too. That's what every prophet has ever said. Any wise man knows there is a creator to whom you owe everything. You're not independent. You must worship God. How you go about doing that, I'll tell you, I don't care. I mean, I'm not a judge. But when it comes to just the basis of science, you're a creationist. You believe in the creation. You do not believe in evolution because it has been disproved. You do not listen to anybody who talks about cosmology or the universe because they're crazy. You're on Earth. You're not going anywhere. You'll die on this planet. Your only duty is to wake up so that you can fulfill your purpose. That's what we're going to be talking about. I'm very sorry that I didn't get around to reading from this book, but I think you see that I am switching to a different tactic than just presenting quantum mechanics and general relativity. I've been doing that for over 1,000 lectures now. Here's the problem that I face.
Zero response.
Do you know why the Prophet Muhammad was sent? It was to make him fulfill the Abrahamic promise that Abraham would be the father of many nations. Thank you for listening. Allah is one of his names. In Hebrew, it's Eloah. Just so you know what you're saying when you say Allah, you're saying beloved. Beloved Father. Beloved Protector. Beloved Nourisher. But his name, I will teach you in one of the next videos. So stay tuned. And Allah bless you and protect you and bring you into his paradise. He will. He never goes back on his word. Thank you. Stay tuned.